Welcome back to the Macro Golf YouTube channel. Back here with Levi. Levi, thank you for coming back on the channel.
You're welcome.
And we're back here at Chapel Springs Golf Centre, and we're taking our little series that we've been doing a little bit further. So obviously the first video, which I'll tag at the top here, we were talking about how the body works in the golf swing.
Yeah.
And then we narrowed that down a little bit, and we started now talking about different body parts. So today we're going to talk about the wrists specifically. So we might talk a little bit about grip, but mostly about wrist angles, how the wrists work, and some positions that you find some of your players struggling with or getting into, and also some things that you can watch out for in your own swing as well. So as always, if you've got any questions or anything, drop them down in the comments below. Levi will kind of work through those. But hopefully we'll cover everything you're going to need in this video today. We're trying to keep it sort of a bit shorter as well.
Yeah,
we've realised we've been yapping on a little bit, so we're going to try and keep this a little bit shorter for you guys as well today. So I don't know where we even start, Levi, to be honest. Wrists.
Yeah, okay.
Where are we? What are we doing? I don't know if you want to start a setup or if you want to then take us through the normal kind of phases and stages that you usually talk about. But thoughts, wrists, where do we go?
So grip, obviously, is something that we have to identify,
yeah.
Whether it's too much in the palm or whether it's, in the fingers. So where you get your feel from, obviously, with throwing a ball and gripping a club, is obviously from your fingers. And this is where we need to be gripping the club. If it's too much into your palm, you won't be able to use your wrist properly. So this club becomes a lot heavier. Obviously, this having the same weight, let's say, characteristics as a hammer or an axe. The weight of it's at the end. So if I grip it in my palm, I won't be able to use my wrist properly. So then that's going to also take any control out, but also as well, it's incredible the amount of speed that you get from your wrist. So really, we're putting some form of limitation to creating speed.
Yep, it's almost like an extra lever, right? So it's something that gets forgotten about quite a lot. So I think maybe we'll do a separate video on grip specifically. I think it's probably got its own like nuances we can go down. But let's talk like position of wrist and maybe the importance of it through the stages. So from setup all the way through, what type of things we can look out for? What is the correct movement? Is there a specific correct movement for the wrists, or is there tendencies, or are there some things that everyone should be doing? And what are some typical issues that you might see some of your players?
Of course, yeah. So if we look at the left wrist would get into more of a wrist cock position, and the right wrist would create a little bit more of the hinge motion. So in a setup position, if I got the feeling that, let's say, the left hand pushed the butt down and then the right picked the club head up into motion, it would set it more into this position here. So the club head would actually sit just outside of the hands. Mm-hmm. So wrist cock being, let's say, the thumb working up and down, almost like a thumbs up and a thumbs down. And then wrist hinge would be like a door opening and closing.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So is this how you would start people to trigger a backswing? Would you get people to think of this stuff all the way back? Is that
for some players, it's whether it's hindering you and whether it's causing a problem, and for some people it works really, really well. So if you have a look on tour, you might see players like Danny Willett, for a good example, right? Uses a lot of wrist movement on the takeaway. You have a look at like a Dustin Johnson, uses quite a lot of wrist hinge on the way back. But then you look at other players like McIlroy, won't use a lot at all, has an incredible amount of stretch, which is what we obviously spoke about in first lesson. So the reason why I came on into that first lesson and spoke about the stretch motion is because it's very, very common that a lot of players tend to get too much, let's say, rotation coming from, let's say, the forearm and from the wrist. So there's an instability of things like the club face, but also as well the butt of the club moving out of the arc. So really, we want to kind of limit the rotation out of this, and we want to get the feeling that this actually works a lot quieter, but if anything, it creates a bit more wrist cock as the right wrist hinges. So the club face sits more at this 45 position here, rather than it, opening up and the toe sitting up too much.
And I know you do a lot of this, so I think probably answering the question, but is this why we like quite a lot of this kind of like split grip drill work?
Definitely.
It kind of gets you to feel that a little bit different.
Exactly. Right? So it gets you to feel the different characteristics and basically sort of like put the rolls in the correct places. The right arm, right shoulder controls more the shaft and the club head. The left arm, left shoulder controls more the butt end. So if I simply just rotate this out, this is what gets this out. Yeah. If I kept this quiet and I rotate this too much through my wrist, this is where this now comes into problem. So this actually isn't the problem now. This is more the problem.
Yeah.
So through split grip, this is where, like I said, we can create more stability working in the motion and get the rolls of the movement better.
So is there a little drill someone could work, if we're kind of breaking this into the stages, is there a little drill that someone could work on to kind of feel that correct motion?
Correct, yes.
Let's have a little look at that.
So I like to feel for some players, if they're struggling with this motion, to actually feel that they take the wrists out of it a little.
Interesting.
So creating a little bit more of the stretch, because I feel like for some players, this can be just a very, very awkward topic, especially in practice. Like if somebody doesn't have the sort of access to use mirrors, or hasn't got their tripod with them, this is where, you know, we can then use other specific drills and exercises, right? So if I got into posture and simply just get the feeling that my hands, wrists and arms are actually creating a little bit more stretch, let's say to around the right thigh, nothing's really happened too much. What we can probably do from here for some players is actually create a little bit more wrist hinge out of this right hand. Okay. So like I said, we don't want to be getting the butt of the club working away from the body. We want to feel that everything works tight and we actually create, let's say, a little bit of a set for some players. So this right wrist goes into some form of hinge. So if I put the left hand on the right arm and I just hinge the wrist, this will then get the club head moving away and travel further, as the butt of the club's not really doing too much. So the wrist works as a hinge, and then from here you can keep the feeling that the wrist is hinged and then the face is opening as it hinges, and that is where you'll then get much more of this loaded shoulder look.
So let's take that up into the top of the backswing. This is where we start to, you know, people love to stop their swings at the top of the backswing and see their wrist position and see what's going on. There's obviously a lot of popularity at time over a kind of a bowed wrist position, all these different things. So how does this then start to transform into a position at the top of the backswing? And what types of things would you look at in a player in terms of good, bad, top to the backswing position? And obviously, as always in the golf swing, things are motioning through this. So it's not just a snap point, but what type of motion are we seeing through the wrist and through the kind of the interaction with the club at that next part of course.
So the wrist is really supposed to be loading, right? It's supposed to be taking the weight of the club and it's supposed to be loading. So the loading obviously looks as wrist cock and wrist hinge. So to do that, we then obviously stabilize the joint. So if I'd done it in front of this camera here, so wrist cock and then wrist hinge, that joint is now stable.
Yep.
That is what then loads up the forearm. And then obviously if I lift this up, this is what then sets and loads the shoulder. So this is what we obviously want to see in the golf swing. We want to see some stability, but we want to see some loading at the top of the backswing. We can do this, if we do this correctly, and it's such a repeatable, repetitive motion, because everybody's after consistency. So this is how you create consistency, by creating stability, in my opinion. So let's say if we worked it into this position here where there's not too much happening. So first video, we obviously worked on more the stretch kind of motion. But then, like I said, if we incorporated some wrist hinge into this right palm, so the club head has basically sort of like got a little bit more range of motion, keep the hinge and then get the feeling that the face is opening up almost like we're hitting a bunker shot. That is what will then start setting this shoulder correctly, but the wrist is stable at that position there. So the club face is nice and square at the top, sitting roughly sort of like 45 degrees, and the wrist is loaded at the top, which is obviously what we want. So we're creating stability, but loading the wrist and in the forearm.
Let's talk a little bit about that bowed wrist, famous movement then. So what would cause people to have this wrist? Obviously, I've heard people that have just gone to the range and then just tried to bow their wrist intentionally at the top. What is this kind of situation with a top of swing wrist position? Are there some advantages just having more kind of forearm flexion and getting this wrist flexed into a better position? What potential issues could that then form down the line for people? I'm sure people have gone and tried this, had a little bit of success for a couple of swings, and then it's all gone to pot. So what are we looking at with this kind of bowed wrist position at the top? And is this something that people should be checking for in their own swing? Is this something that they just add in? Is there other chain reactions either side of that they need to look out for? Yeah,
and this is the thing. So obviously a lot of people are very, very fascinated, and every reason to be, with trying to get some shaft lean at impact. That's obviously what's going to create, get an extra distance out of it, because the last thing we want to do is create an instability around impact, like a breakdown. So some people, you get some of these unicorns that come into different sports, whether it's basketball, whether it's tennis, whether it's golf, that some players have a really, really bowed left wrist. So one of them, that obviously came out years ago after like Lee Trevino and things like that, is obviously Dustin Johnson. But when we looked at Dustin, he'd done this since a junior. So it's something that he's picked up as a junior. It's not necessarily something that he's been taught. Whereas for some people, some coaches, they would very heavily try and teach this method. And it very much depends on the individual. So obviously me and Joe sort of knowing each other, talk off camera. Every golf lesson has got to be personalised to a certain degree. Obviously, us golf coaches, same as Joe, working with players, you want to see kind of like the same thing, really. You want to see balance, stability and mobility, which is obviously going to create the consistency.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's like, how do you go about with some players? So the problem is with this bowed left wrist, for some players, one of my best friends that I coach, he was having lessons off of another coach a few years ago, a famous, actual, really good golf coach, but he was getting him to bow this wrist down so much to where he actually had to stop playing for a while, and he ended up getting things like tendonitis.
Yeah.
So my job was to basically look at this and go, well, the problem is it's making your golf worse, but you can't even play golf because of it. So we've got to look at this and go, we kind of got to take it out, which is what we've done. It's much more neutral up top. He feels that he can play golf again, plays off +3, he's a good player. And, at the end of the day, this is it's whether it works for you or not. So like I said, Dustin Johnson being a unicorn, you get players like Colin Morikawa has a very, very, let's say, weak left-hand grip, bows it at the top, but the club face is actually square. But then you get some players that get this face shut down, and what do they have to do from there? They have to hold on to it.
Yeah.
So you have to have an incredible amount of athleticism. Like Dustin Johnson, he's like a cat. He can move very, very well. But if you get somebody that's 50 years of age up the driving range playing off 26, it's not going to work.
Good to know. I'm sure you saved some people some time. So I'm assuming what's happening here, no matter what our wrist position at the top here, there's obviously some kind of transitional load that we've gone through. So how do we then start to get this working and obviously loading up a lot of power at the top here, but this is where we start to create a little bit of lag. And this is where we're going to start to move into really accelerate and start to use this power down. So let's take it from the top all the way down through impact. And let's talk about kind of the role that the wrist will play through that kind of acceleration.
Of course. So I think it's very, very important that obviously in the downswing we create space and we create some form of width, because the problem is with things like the hand path, if it travels in too much, that's where we then run into steepness. That's where we run into sort of instability and inconsistent movements. So it's very, very important that we have this width. So the right arm actually kind of works away from you. So as the body's obviously working this way, the hands and arms feel like they're going over here. When we obviously sort of like combine this, it looks more as downforce. So downforce can be also created by creating a little bit more wrist set into that position there. So everything's reasonably set and sort of relaxed up top. But if I got this right arm working away from me as I increase the wrist angles, it can then work there. So this is an incredibly strong and fast power lever. Yeah. Honestly, like some of the results you can get out of just doing that is actually incredible.
Let's see that with a club down. I don't know if you want to hit some as well, but just to kind of see the timing of this stuff as well, because I think this gets spoken about a lot of people losing angles very early. Of course. Obviously, eventually we'll lose these angles. That's just what'll happen.
Yeah.
But at what point are you starting to see, when you see a player do it efficiently, at what point are we starting to lose these angles? At what point does this start to come?
Yeah, so there is obviously, we need to release it, right? It's a bit like any other sport, javelin, tennis, any kind of ball sport as well, we do need to have some form of release.
I suppose that's a good question to actually ask then. So because I see a lot of people actually just trying to hold on for dear life to this angle and never actually release it. So we're saying that we will release this. It's just the timing of which we release it, which is the key, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think the thing is with impact, it all happens very, very quick and a bit too late.
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like if we create things like acceleration, we create things like de-acceleration to create acceleration. So when we're in this position here and we're working this down, we actually will accelerate the butt of the club down here to where the butt of the club will then decelerate, almost like a punch, and then the club head will then accelerate. So really, we actually get this more aligned up. So it looks more like this rather than a hold off.
Yeah.
Rather than holding on to it.
Let's see you hit one.
Yeah? Okay, well, look.
The only reason I come here.
Yeah, of course.
So let's see what that looks like as a drill. So you've obviously spoken a few about some of these kind of split stance things. So if someone wants to take away and kind of work on their wrist angles a little bit, let's see somewhere you're drilling this.
Yeah.
And then let's see you hit one and see if we can kind of see the difference between the two. So I know they will look a little bit different
of course,
as you do that. So I don't know if you just want to talk through for the guys how you would check on this, or if you check on stuff in your own game. I know it's a big part of your own game.
Yeah, of course.
So how would you start to just get a little bit of a drill, a little bit of a feel, and then let's see you hit one as well.
Of course. I'll tell you what to do. Can I get a sandwich? If you just pass me one of them clubs over there.
Any of these?
Either one. It doesn't matter. Thank you. So this is a 58 degree. So the idea of creating some of these wrist forces and sort of angular forces and things like that is to start off with quite a slow backswing and then increase the pressure and speed sort of like at some point in the swing. So I would probably start off with like half backswings and just really trying to develop sort of like the timing of it, the sequencing and things like that, just to basically get things matched up. The worst thing that we can do is try and obviously take the cover off of it. So I think it's very, very important that we go nice and slow, go at a nice, easy pace. So I'm going to do some half swings to begin with, right? So we're going to work it into the backswing that we spoke about a second ago. So roughly sort of like chest, ribcage sort of height. And then from here, I'm simply going to get my right palm working away from me as I increase the wrist angles coming down. So you can see it almost like it's gathering a little bit of this lag, we call it, obviously, back in the days. But for some people, they call it angular force. So if I'm in this position here, if I work it away from me, but I increase the wrist angle, that is what's really, really sort of like loading up the speed. It's storing it until I can obviously let it go through the ball. So we're going to go nice and slow, nice and easy.
Do you feel like you're able to hold better, more of a penetrating flight with these angles as well? I just think that's something you just see with good wedge players, for example.
Definitely.
You always see this.
100%.
Just a much more penetrating. I think they just hold onto this angle so much better through the wrist and just release that power at the right time rather than kind of getting this flippy feel. It obviously depends on the shot that we're trying to hit. Well, this
it's all relatable to the shot because, you know, if I've got to hit a shot over a bunker from 30 yards, I'm not going to be doing this mechanics.
Exactly.
This would be much more long game, this kind of shot. Or let's say if I wanted to hit a flighted wedge. So that would obviously be another video. But when it comes to more the long game kind of stuff and we want to really try and get like this knockout punch coming into the shot, this is what we obviously want to do. But like this being a 58 degree, if I want this to go like, let's say, a 100-yard carry, so it's not a full backswing, but that's definitely gone 100 yards.
Yeah.
So the idea of it is to obviously go, right, okay, where am I getting this force? Where am I getting this pressure from? Is it coming from the nervous system? Is it coming from... Do you see what I mean? So I'm not rushing into this golf ball at the moment static. I'm almost like moving around in my feet a little bit, just trying to sort of like get calm, relax, breathe a little bit, and then move into the motion rather than like tensing up. And because we obviously know that it's going to limit mobility.
Yeah, I mean, what's also going to happen is we're going to, as we start to grip harder, we start to lose kind of this option that you've been talking about here of being able to create this stability and create this tension. We kind of just lose the ability to feel that, I think, sometimes.
Correct.
As well, which is, you know, the term effortless power is not, you know, there is a lot of power being stored and you need to excel that at the right time. And, if, you know, just from looking at what you're doing there, you can see it and you can hear it.
Definitely.
You can hear that power being released.
Well, look, if I want to break this down even simpler for people, right? So if we looked at the logic side of it, obviously, that's why I pulled up the hammer earlier, right? So if I want to now, let's say, if I want to hammer this nail that's here, obviously I want to be using my wrist, I want to be using my arm to fold, and then I want to be using my shoulder to load, so the elbow elevates. So obviously it's all good doing this motion. This can be very, very repeatable. But obviously golf's not played on this plane line. It's played on a different plane line. It's played more 45 degrees. So if I then worked it this way and I sat the shoulder down and I rotated the arm, if I get the wrist set in, the arm folding and the body coiling, it still ends up in that same position of trying to load it up. And then obviously as I work the power line down, so keeping the arm long, as I increase the wrist set, it works into that position there. So the hammer's running down the forearm. And then we actually get the correct release, which would be more this motion. So if I work it down and I rotate the handle, that's actually what the square face would look like. So to break that down, this is what I get a lot of players doing. If I grip the club and worked it into this position here, right palm only rotates the grip. Very, very small movement. So if I work it up halfway and I bring it back down and I rotate the grip as I just did there, this works as a down force. And this is what actually makes the club face square for impact. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. It makes sense. I think people will be getting their hammers out and giving that a go for sure. Let's touch briefly before we finish it for today on just some things to consider when we are playing some slightly different shots. So is there any change for driver? Is there any change for, like you said, like trying to hit a slightly higher wedge shot, something we can get a bit of release? And is there anything else like, this is going to be a whole other video, I know, but short game and all these types of things is going to be a completely different concept, right? So this is very much designed around this
long game.
Stock
this
shot,
is more
long game.
Correct. So before anybody kind of like jumps on my back, this is 100% more long game kind of stuff. Short game, there's so many variables to short game, so many ways of playing things. You know, left below right, split grip, one-handed, loads of these things that obviously we can use, but this is much more long game kind of stuff. So when you said about sort of hitting a higher shot driver and things like that, with the driver, we actually want to be getting this even further away from you because we want to make this arc so much wider because we're trying to hit up on it. And then when it comes to like the softer shot, we probably don't want to be using as much wrist. So it's a softer shot. So there's so it's always good to go, right, let's work on a stock shot and then let's work around it. So if I said to a player, let's do some bunker work, the first shot that I want to be doing is flat lie, princess lie as well. So we're sitting it up, middle flag, something that's quite easy. Let's learn that shot. Let's, you know, get the ball coming out, check and release, things like that. Now let's work on the side hill lights, downhill, back flag, tight flag. You've got to learn the basic shot first, and this is what would really, really help.
Love it. Love it. Anything else we think we need to cover wrist angle wise? Anything you feel like we've not gone over today? Anything you feel we're missing?
No, I feel like we're pretty good. I feel like we've kept it sweet, we've kept it short. But look, like I said, I'll go over that movement again of if I set the club and I move it into this position here, so my right arm's quite soft. And if I use right palm only, so not left hand, but right palm only to rotate the grip, there's a very, very limited amount of motion that could be happening here, right? Because at this point, the wrist is hinged and it's set and it's cocked, it's now stable. And this is why it's so important to stabilize it, because when I get the correct rotation coming down, this is what really gets it working correctly. So the club face is square. You know, most people that come to me, they say, I'm hitting a slice, and I watch them hit a ball. The ball's starting miles right, and it's going further right. And I'll ask them a question, you know, where did the ball start? And they'll say, oh, it started straight. No, it's not. It's starting so far right because your club face is open. So we work on that motion. All of a sudden, the ball starts straight and it goes straight. So it's like the problem wasn't the slice, it wasn't the path. The problem was the face more than anything. So if we can get a square face throughout the golf swing, perfect.
Love it. Guys, thank you again for watching. I'm going to put all Levi's details as normal up on the screen. And let us know if there's any other topics you want us to cover. We've got a little list that we're going to work through. But anything else you want covered, let us know. And Levi, thanks again, man. Really
you're welcome. Pleasure.
Cheers, man.